Wednesday, March 3rd, 2021, and this is for international foods. So we are started this week our unit exploring areas of Canada, Mexico, and parts of South America. So the recipe for today is Canadian. We're going to make tourtiere, Canadian meat pie, right? But we're going to do it in a mini form to make it into a little appetizer instead of a big giant pie, okay? So we're going to start off with our meat mixture, getting that going on the stove. So I've got a large nonstick skillet here, right? A little wooden spoon. And I'm going to start off in the pan with a half a pound, so 8 ounces of ground pork and 8 ounces of ground beef, which I've pre-measured out just to save us a little bit of time. All right, so we've got both meats. Now with the ground beef, you want to make sure that you're getting a mixture that is not too lean. So you want to go for something that's an 80, 85%. So you've got somewhere between 15 and 20% fat because that's going to help make our binder afterwards, and you'll see that. So I'm going to get this on the stove right here behind me. We'll get that started to cook down. And we're going to add in a few things into that meat mixture because the meat is the filling of our pie. So we're going to work on the meat filling first, and then we'll go to the pie dough, okay? So we're going to be doing about 3/4 of a cup of an onion, so a medium-sized onion, right? See the size of my hand. It's not too big. Well, we're going to dice that up. So with our onion, root end, remember stem end, we're going to trim off the stem end. This is the part that grows up out of the ground, right? Flip it upside down. We're going to cut straight through our root. That's going to make it easier to peel and also to lay flat while we do our dicing, okay? So you want to peel that outside layer off. And all the onion peel is just part of the onion that dries out. It makes the peel. So we're going to dice this up small and get that into our pan with our ground pork and our ground beef, because that's going to give us a lot of flavor and some moisture as well. And we're also going to be adding in a clove of garlic. So when you're dicing your onions, keep that root end intact, right? Don't trim that off. It'll help hold things in place for you. I'm going to come in and make a little bit thinner of a layer. So in the front, about a 45-degree angle with my knife, fingers are up on top, right? Just going to slice in a little bit. You can see there, right? So that way it has that little cut, but not through the root. And then I'm going to slice this way towards the root, but not through it. And then we're going to dice down. And that way you'll see the nice pieces that you get there, okay? Dice that when you get near the edge. You're good. Any big chunks, just chop them up. So same thing again, right? We cut down through. And we'll slice this way. Onion is a great combination with meats, especially pork and beef. So about 3/4 of a cup. Okay. Now this is going to go straight into my pan with the meat that I've got going and started back here. We're going to add this right in. You want to give that some time to cook and break down, right? Remember, it's my little cloth there that's damp to keep my cutting board in place. It's not sliding. We're just going to keep breaking that up and mixing it all together. So it's going to be a really nice mixture when it's all done. And then we're going to add in a clove of garlic. So when you have a small piece of garlic, this is the clove. The bigger part is the head. So we just need one of these. So we're going to take our knife, the blade away from you. Right? Smack it. Peel comes right off. Okay? Look for any dried pieces on the end and just trim that off. You just don't want that in your final product. Okay? Then we're just going to chop this up. You can put your hand on top, right? Keeping that tip of the blade on the board. And just run your knife through. Now, if your garlic tends to be a little slippery, you can also take just a little pinch of kosher salt. So we're going to be adding a little salt into our dish anyways. And that'll help give you a little bit more grit. Right, that extra little grip will stop the garlic from sliding all over your cutting board. All right. All right. So now I'm going to add this into the pan with our ground beef and pork and our onion. You want to get that mixture going. It's already had a really good aroma. Now, there are some versions of this. Everybody kind of has their own family recipe. Some do it with just ground pork. You can do it with a blend. If you search online for tortilla recipes, you're going to find tons of different variations because every family has their own recipe. Right? So we're also going to add into this a little bit of sarriette. Right? Now, sarriette is a dried herb. It is also known as summer savory. Okay? So you'll see the inside. Right? If you don't have that, you could replace this with something like an herbes de Provence or things, or maybe just a little oregano. But this is the key to Canadian French cuisine, right? Is to have sarriette. So I'm going to add in a half a teaspoon right into the meat mixture. So I want to give this some time to break down. Right? So I've got it in my hand here. I'm just going to give it a really good pinch. And that'll help release all the flavors from the dry herbs, right? Breaking it all up. Now this mixture too, we're going to cook this down with meat and not drain off any fat. That is going to be key to this, okay? We will be thickening the liquid that's released from all these onions and the meat and things. But don't drain off the fat. You want to have that as some moisture content to your tortilla. So I'm just breaking this up with the back of my wooden spoon, right? So we don't have any pieces that are too big and so that it evenly cooks. Now I'm also going to add in here my allspice. It's some ground allspice, so 1/4 teaspoon. Okay. This allspice is a powder. Kind of has that essence of nutmeg and cinnamon and clove to it, right? Which goes really well with the pork. Throw that in. Then all we need left is some salt and pepper. So a half a teaspoon of kosher salt. We're going to go into the pan. Right, for our seasoning. And some black pepper. So about 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper. So a good 10, 12 twists on a fresh pepper grinder. All right. And there we go. All right. So now our meat mixture is cooking. Looking lovely. Don't worry about if it doesn't look like it's coming together at this point, right? So I said we're going to add in some flour as a binder. So there's our meat mixture that's cooking. It's releasing off some liquid. And we're just going to let that cook down just a little bit more. You want to make sure that the meat is cooked fully all the way through, right? You don't want to have any raw beef or pork in there. Now, these pies are going to bake in the oven, so that'll be that extra level of safety because it will have some time in the oven. But we still want to get this cooked through properly the first time out. And it's almost there. 11 seconds. And the last piece of this is to add a little bit of a thickener, right? Because we have all that juice from the meat, that little bit of fat, the moisture from the onion and the garlic. We want to thicken this up so it tightens up. So you could do that a couple of different ways. I'm going to use flour today, but you could also use breadcrumbs or you could use instant mashed potatoes. Just sprinkle the potato powder in, wherever you have on hand, right? I didn't want to open a whole package just for that, so we're going to use flour. Now my meat is cooked fully all the way through. I'm going to add 3 tablespoons of flour right into the pan, right? And this is going to basically make a roux mixture because roux is flour and butter that's cooked together. 1, 2, and 3. So all that liquid that's in the pan is going to get absorbed by this flour and work as our binding. Okay. This will also help stop your pies from getting soggy when they are in the oven. So if it releases any more juice, that flour will continue to hold it together. At this point, I'm going to shut the heat off on this burner. Just let it sit here. Cool down slightly. So then we're going to talk about pie crust, right? But I want you to bring it in so you can see, right? And there is the mixture for your tortilla. Some nice ground meat, onions, garlic, spices. Okay. Now, let that sit. Do it thing and talk about pie crust, okay? Now, pie crust is something that can be a little bit tricky. It does take practice, okay? So don't be intimidated by pie crust. Do them over and over again, okay, until you get it right. Biggest thing is not over mixing, okay? A lot of people tend to over mix, think they have to really knead it. It's not a bread dough, it's a pastry dough, right? So you have to be really super delicate with it. So we're gonna start off for our pie dough today with 2 cups of all-purpose flour, right? So my 1 cup measure here. I've got my big spoon. You've seen this before. I'm gonna scoop this in, overfill, and then scrape it at the top to get a nice level measurement, right? This way I'm not packing the flour in, but make sure it's level. Okay, so we're gonna do that one more time. We need 2 cups. And this pie dough recipe will make enough for a full pie. So if you wanted to do this as a full pie, for enough for a bottom crust and a top crust. Right? Because that is how traditionally tortilla is made. But like I said, we're gonna do a mini version today. All right, so we're gonna put our flour to the side, and then we're gonna need a little bit of salt. So I'm going to do a teaspoon of kosher salt into our flour. Okay. Make sure it's always a nice level measurement. And we're going to do a 1/4 teaspoon, just a little one, of baking powder. Make sure it's the powder, right? Not soda. The one in the can. So just a little 1/4 teaspoon. Give that a quick stir just to mix in both of those. We'll to our flour here. Right. And then we're going to add in a little bit of water after. So I've got my water off here to the side, so we're not ready for that yet. Next, we need to add in the fat. And the fat for this, I'm going to be using lard. Now, this lard has been chilled in the fridge for a little while to get it good and cold. It'll help hold it up better in the recipe. Okay. Now, lard comes in boxes just like this, right? It's usually in the dairy section of your store, so ask them there if you can't find it. Sometimes it's sold in the aisle with the vegetable oil as well. Okay. So I'm going to measure out. So you need about 3/4 of a cup of our lard. You could also substitute in shortening. So I'm going to measure out 6 ounces. This is just going to be easier than trying to scoop this into a measuring cup. Back more, smidge more. All right, so 6 ounces. You're good. Okay. Now this is going to go straight into my flour mixture. Now the key to this, when you're working with pie dough of any kind, right, is that you need to break up this fat. And this will break up, even though it's chilled, it'll break up pretty easily. So coat it with the flour and just get in there and get your hands dirty. Right. Now you can do pie doughs in the food processor and all of these fancy mixers and things like that. But the best way to learn how to do a good pie dough is to do it by hand, right? Nothing replaces that feeling of the dough, the texture, the moisture content. It'll really help you to teach you how to do this the right way, right? What I'm doing is I'm just breaking that up. You see my fingers, I'm just kind of pinching it through. Make sure everything's getting coated with flour. So I'm trying to break up all those little fat pieces. So when the dough is there, those little pockets of fat will cause steam, and that's what's going to give me my nice flaky crust. Okay. Like that. All right. Now we're going to start to add in our water. So the recipe calls for 5 to 6 tablespoons. So that's a guideline. Sometimes it's a little more. Depends on how dry it is that day when you're making this, okay? So I'm going to start with 5. And 5. And this is just cold water. You can have everything cold and chilled. It will actually help more. You can put your flour in the fridge for a little while, your lard or your shortening, or you can even put it in the freezer for a little bit before you make your dough. Right. Now I can already see that this is going to be a little bit too dry because I still have a lot of dry mixture at the bottom here. So I'm going to go ahead and add in that 6 tablespoons. And then I'll see if I need a little more, right? Like I said, it is a guideline because depending on the type, the brand of flour that you use, what kind of fat, your pie dough will change and vary, right? Now, pie dough is also good after it has some time to rest and sit. So if you can let it sit for a good half an hour in the fridge, you don't want to go too much because you want to be able to roll it. But see, this is already starting to come together. But it's just a touch dry. So I'm just going to put a couple drops of water in. Maybe a teaspoon. There we go. That's better. Right. At this point, you could always put it on the counter and mix it there as well. Right. But this is what you're looking for. You don't want to over mix, right? Where if it looks like you really haven't mixed it much, but it's holding its shape and it can shape into a ball, leave it alone at this point. Okay. Anything beyond this starts to be over mixed because the idea is to have that fat kind of marbled through, just like you would with a good steak, right? You want to be able to see little streaks of your fat throughout your mixture, okay? So I'm going to set this one to the side because I have one that was chilled. Another little trick, put a little flour on your hands. I'm going to do this over the trash can, and it'll help get off all the sticky stuff. I'm not going to worry about it 100% at this point because we're going to be rolling pie dough anyways. All right, but it'll get off any big chunks you have left. There we go. Okay, so now I've got some pie dough, like I said, that I rolled some for my demo sample for you guys today, but I have it ready. And you can see when you're looking at it, there's little bits of fat throughout. There's a line there, there's a streak there, there's little chunks, some marbling over here. That's what you're looking for, right? Because that means that it hasn't been overmixed. You don't want to completely blend that in. I want to have those little streaks and pockets of fat so that steam will puff up those layers. So that's what makes a good pie dough. So I've got some flour here, just some more of the all-purpose flour. And we're going to sprinkle it on our nice clean counter, or it was clean before I started. All right, so just a light sprinkle of flour. You can put a little bit on top. Okay, and then you're going to need your rolling pin. Now we're going to be rolling out enough dough to cut circles. I'll show you why. So we're going to be making, like I said, a mini version of this. So as you start to roll, you notice that it might start to stick on the pin. Put a little bit more flour. Right? You can just add the flour only as you need to. Okay. Now it's also good to have handy your little veg scraper tool. Let me just wipe off the lard off of it. And something, or a metal spatula of some sort, right? To make sure that the dough is still moving. You don't need to flip your dough, but you want to make sure that it's liftable, right? So once we cut out our circles, we want to be able to actually get them off the counter. Okay. So this is not a full recipe of dough. This is slightly more than half of a batch, just to give you a reference. Okay. So when a good wood rolling pin comes in handy, remember never to soak your wood rolling pins either in water. Always just wipe them clean when you're done. If you soak them, they tend to swell and crack and dry out, right? And that'll ruin a good rolling pin really quickly. Right. So like I said, just keep coming in. Make sure that you can lift your dough. Little sections at a time. There we go. Right. It does like to stick. It just depends on the humidity in your kitchen and things too. So we're just going to sprinkle a little more flour underneath. Make sure we're moving. Top if it needs it. And just take time and patience. It's always the hard part. Okay? That's why I said don't go flipping the dough back and forth, right? Just work with it on the one surface. Okay? Now, what we're going to be putting this into today is a little mini muffin pan. So I've got a little bit of the non-stick cooking spray here. I'm going to spray this over the trash can. You can do that over your sink too. Just going to give it a light spritz, right? Doesn't need to be super heavy. Just a little light spritz of the non-stick spray. So it'll make it easier to get these out when we are done. And we're going to be cutting circles to fit these. So it's a 3-inch circle. So make sure you measure across. And that looks awful big. But remember, the dough is going to go inside all the little cuts. Okay. So we're going to cut some circles. And we're going to cut another fun little shape for our topping. All right. So try and get as many circles as you can. And not to re-roll. Because the re-roll dough never comes out quite as good. So I just dip my cutter in a little flour here. Press down, give it a little twist. Give a couple, just a little bit more flour. Like I said, you can re-roll it. Just be very gentle, kind of smoosh it back together to do your re-roll. But the consistency is not always as good as the first roll of the pie dough. Yeah, let's see if I can squeeze one more, which I can right here. And try and get an even 12. Oh, yeah, right there, perfect. I'm going to save a little scraps, though, because I'm going to need those for something else. Get that off to the side. So, with your dough circles, right, use your little bench scraper spatula to pick them up. And then you're going to start putting them into your little muffin pan. Show you, just gonna set that gently down here. And then each one of these, you want to make sure that you're pressing them into the center, down all the way to the bottom. And then you can just ruffle the edge a little bit on the top. So it'll be like that. Okay. So go through and get all our circles. Then this is just going to get our tortilla meat filling inside. I like them when they're a little bit different, each one. Definitely looks a little bit more rustic, authentic, right? Somebody knows that they're home baked. Sticking those circles in. And each one of these is going to hold about a tablespoon's worth of filling. Just click up here real quick. Yeah. All right. So we're going to come in. I sent each one of our circles. But I'm going to be putting a little design on top as well, okay? So you don't need to put a top crust on the tortilla, especially when they're this size. Typically, a traditional full pie, you would. You'd have a bottom crust, your filling, and your top crust. But in this case, we don't need to because of the size. So I am going to put a little decorative design on top instead. Just going to make it fun. Each one of your pie dough circles in. Like I said, it was a 3-inch circle to be able to fit inside your mini muffin pan and still have a little bit of an edge on the top without being too small. I just took my circle cutter set and measured out the one that was the closest to it. It was just shy of 3 inches. So it's plenty big. Okay. Now, you could do these in a larger muffin size as well, but same thing. You'd want to make sure to test out the size of a circle. Test one first and make sure that it fits in just like this and caves down to the inside. Okay? Sorry for tilting too much on you. Excess. I said I'm going to use my scraps. It's not going to go to waste because I am going to use that to make my design for the top. Easily get, for this recipe, you'll easily be able to get 2 dozen of these little cups. All right. Now we've got all our dough into our cups. Like I said, a little light spray on the muffin pan with some nonstick cooking spray. Works good. That way it'll ensure that they all come out. All right, we're just going to save our extra scrap dough there for a minute because we're going to grab some filling. Now, I'm just going to transfer this filling into a little bowl here just to make it easier for space-wise. Tortilla filling. Like I said, this will definitely make a generous, nice, deep, full-size pie. So give this a good stir. You can see how much it's thick, that there's not a lot of excess liquid, but it still has a nice moisture content, right? A lot of people make mistakes with tortilla is they make it too dry by draining out the fat, and you don't have enough moisture for your pie, right? So you want to take a good tablespoon of filling, make sure you're getting a little bit of everything right down in the inside, and give it a little press, okay? Because then you'll find you're usually able to fit a little bit more. You're also filling in any of those spaces of air that get trapped when you're filling it. Now these are going to go into an oven set to 425 degrees. I've already got that preheated behind me. And there's a lot of discussion of the best way to eat tortilla. I have family members that put, you know, ketchup on it, some maple syrup. I like to just eat it plain as is, right? So you decide what you like, right? Whatever your family normally has with it. So these would be great for little parties and things like that, right? As an appetizer or as a full-size pie for dinner, okay? So we want to fill, like I said, fill and pack each one of them really well, giving them that little gentle press, right? To make sure that you're getting enough filling inside each one. Now, you could freeze these as is at this point and then bake them later, right? That's very easy to do. Or you could bake them, freeze them, and reheat them later. So either way, so if you end up with leftovers, don't waste them, okay? So we're gonna set our filling back here to the side, and we're gonna go back to our little scraps of pie crust here. A little extra flour on the counter. I'm gonna roll this a little thinner, just a touch. So this piece is a little sticky. And we're gonna put a little cap on the top of our pie. Like I said, it doesn't have to have a top crust, but we wanna give it a little something, okay? So I've got a little maple leaf cutter. We're gonna take that and cut out some leaves to go on the top of our pie. And then put your little cutout leaf on the top of each one. You could leave some plain if you'd like. Okay? And this is why I said to keep the scraps to the side, right? So that way you're not wasting any of them. So you are kind of giving it a top crust, but not a full crust. It's a little bit harder in a small muffin pan to make a full circle top crust. So this is an easy way to do that. So find a little cookie cutter of some sort, whatever shape you've got. Nicely, because Canada loves the maple syrup as well. Honor that, right? With our nice little maple leaf. Try to have enough here. Just our leaf. There we go. And working with pies is messy, right? There's no doubt about it. You see my whole kitchen when I'm done, right? But I don't worry about it because it's good. It tastes good. It's good for you, right? Cleaning my rolling pin. So if your rolling pin gets a little sticky, just a little dry paper towel. There we go. That's better. So we're going to finish cutting out our leaves. And like I said, you don't have to egg wash these. These can just go in the oven as is. They'll get a really nice golden crust color. You could put a little egg wash on the top if you'd like, but you don't have to. It's just an extra step. All right, so our little leaves on the top of each one. Can't leave one without. All right, so now we've got all of our little tortilla complete, right? And there they are. They're going to go into the oven. Like I said, 425 degrees on this, right in the middle rack of your oven. And then, just putting some of this to the side here. This is another reason the bench scrapers come in handy. Cleaning up the mess, I'm going to show you something that I already finished earlier. And there you go, right? So these are our mini tourtiere, the appetizer size, right? And you'll see it gives us a really beautiful little crust, right? Makes a nice little cup. Couple bites for each one. Like I said, you can take these at this point. Well, once they're cool, freeze them. You can refrigerate any leftovers and reheat them, warm them up slightly. But they're perfect little snack size. They're great for holidays and things. So instead of having to make a full pie, this is a nice way to make something that's a little bit
Chef,
bite size. Yep.
How long does it take?
So they take about 15 minutes in the oven to finish. So they're not bad at all, right? Super fast, super simple. I ate a couple of the sample ones earlier. They're delicious, right? But, you know, I'm also French Canadian, so I'm a little biased. So hopefully you guys try this out, especially the pie dough. Try it with the lard. Don't be intimidated by that because it gives a lot of great moisture and flavor, right? You can still use a lard crust for your sweet pies as well, okay? So that's it for the mini tourtières. See if anybody else got any more questions.